Hello, everyone. You probably don't know me. No. So today I'm going to be talking about unseen biases and how they shape work in software teams or any interaction that we have actually in the social world out there. Before we start talking about specific biases, we have to know what bias actually is. So bias is an implicit association or a belief attitude that we have towards a social group, an individual, or ourselves. So looking at these two pictures, for example, we can make assumptions based on what we see by their hands or what's in the background. We can make assumptions about the nationality of these people, right? We all have predictions. Maybe this is an Italian, right? Italians like to talk with hands. And there we have numbers, math. We usually connect Asians to being good in math. So we make this kind of assumptions. So why do we make them? There are several reasons for that. But first of all, it's also our brain tendency to do that. So we want to make sense of the world that is around us, and we are all the time looking for patterns. I'm sure you've seen, articles or stories about things that people saw in trees that looks like Jesus, or clouds that look like specific, people. So we're kind of trying to find patterns, and that also means in a social world, we're trying to predict or expect what will happen next based on what we are seeing. The other tendency is to simplify things that we see. So we are surrounded with a lot of things that we have to pay attention to, but we cannot pay attention to everything at once. So we need to adjust our focus and simplify. So focus on some things and simplify them. And the other thing that creates associations and these biases is previous experience and knowledge. And not only our previous experience, but also what we read or hear from other people, right? So even if I haven't been to Italy, I probably seen a video or somebody told me, that they've seen an Italian that talks with hands, and this is the expectation that I have when I come there, even though I haven't really had any evidence in real life that would confirm my hypotheses. So we have some sort of associations, right? Patterns that we see. And based on these, we make judgments. And based on these judgments, we create expectations. So we even are trying to, and this all happens implicitly, we're predicting what's going to happen next based on what we know, what our previous experience are, and what our brain is kind of doing behind the scenes. So today I'm going to be focusing on two biases. There's loads of biases out there. We don't have enough time for that. I'm happy to do a show and tell on more. But first bias that we're going to talk about is the Dunning-Kruger effect. And that's connected more to self-perception. And the second one that we're going to talk about is the halo effect. And that's more connected to how we perceive others around us. So, Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect claims that for people that have low ability or low skill set, they tend to overestimate their ability. They think they are better than they really are, okay? And vice versa, that goes for people with high ability as well. They tend, about the mistake, they tend to underestimate their skills. So what is the red thread here? Both of these people have this lack of metacognitive skills. Now, metacognitive skills are actually skills of thinking about our abilities, what we can or cannot do. So evaluating our own skills. And we tend to be very bad at that. So humans are bad at that. And expect that from yourself and others. Okay? So how does it really work, this Dunning-Kruger effect? I think you like it because you're mostly here developers. This is going to be connected to spaces or numbers. I'm going to show you a graph. So on this graph, you see the vertical line, which is confidence, and the horizontal line, which is competence. Or let's put it easier. This is how much we think we know, right? And the competence is how much we actually know. And the horizontal line could also mean time, because our skill set grows with time. Our knowledge grows with time. So let's imagine I want to learn how to communicate effectively. I start here, right? I have zero confidence, zero competence, and I say, what am I going to do? I'm going to read a 300-page book on effective communication, right? This is an excellent way to start. I read that book. I spend hours reading that book, and when I finish it, I come to this point. I know it all, right? Whatever situation will come, will I cross, I know how to react. I'll communicate effectively. Just bring it on, right? But I come to these situations, I talk to people, and I see I'm not that good at effective communication. So I see that there is more to this than I realized. So I read more, I read some articles, I test it out, and I come to this valley of despair when I think I don't know anything. Although on a competence level, I actually am more competent, but I think I'm not. If I'm persistent, I continue, I read on more articles, I test my behavior, I do this in different situations. So it's all starting to make more sense. I start to feel that things are probably much more complex than this first book told me they are. But I have to just test them out. And at some point, I come to this line or this area where it's complicated. So when people ask me, how to communicate effectively, it's a difficult topic. It's complicated. It depends. It depends on a situation. It depends on the person who I talk to. And at this point in time, if you compare my confidence level to the beginning, my confidence level is not as high as it was in the beginning, because I know things are much more complicated than I first thought. So this is something that we all tend to go through. Research told us this numerous times. But how does this effect work in software teams? Okay, so first thing is time evaluations. I know you all do like sprint plannings, you do estimations for projects, how long will it take to finish feature or a whole app. Well, your evaluations are biased based on where you are on this curve, right? If you are in the know-it-all area, you will probably underestimate the time you need for any specific feature. But if you're in the I don't know anything area, you will probably overestimate the time you need. So it's good to realize or try to think, where are you? Next is missed opportunities. So people tend to seek situations where they can grow, or seek situations where they can teach others or mentor others. If I'm in the know-it-all area, I will seek situations where I can mentor others, because I know it all. So I will be searching for mentorship opportunities. I want to teach, but actually I don't have much to teach them because my competence is low. On the other hand, when I don't know anything, or I feel I don't know anything, I actually have many things that I can teach them, but I have the feeling that I don't have enough knowledge. So it's important to also have someone around that can maybe push you in things at the right time. So even if you might think, you don't know anything, you've just started, you don't have enough information to help others, maybe just a mentorship opportunity would give you more confidence and would give you a better realization where you are, how much knowledge you have, and even put you on this line up to start to make more sense. You'll learn more. So finding opportunities or thinking about which opportunities are right for you can also be influenced by this effect. Next is interviews. So interviews are one thing that this is shown many times. Why? Because people that are overconfident tend to or can perform much better in interviews. They can present themselves better. They can just hide their low skills. But then they're hired, they go to an assignment and they have no clue how to start working. And they are in a bad situation. But similarly, this can happen on the other low end. So if you have a too low confidence and you don't present yourself well, you'll just not get that opportunity. You will not get the job. You will not get that assignment, even though you do know and you would know how to deal in these situations. Another thing that Dunning-Kruger effect is important to consider is when giving feedback. Now, I'm going to show you a bit of a different graph. So before we were looking at the reality state of our relationship between confidence and competence, but if we're idealists, right? This is where the ideal self-awareness line would be. So when my competence grows, my confidence would grow. So this is, let's say, my goal. What does this tell me if I want to give feedback to someone? Well, I want to give feedback to Bob. Bob has performed poorly in an interview, really didn't show his skills, and I want to give him this feedback. Feedback giving is really hard, but it makes it easier if we know where the other person is standing or where is their perspective in this area, right? If they are, can you see this on this triangle? So above this line, that means they have high confidence, but lower competence. And this is what I call the caution zone. So if you can figure out if you're a person that you're giving feedback to is in this zone, you know that it might be difficult for them to take this feedback. Why? Because their expectation of how they performed is probably different from reality. How can you find out where they are? Well, you can just ask them before you give them feedback, how do you think the interview went? What do you think was challenging? Do you think anything went well? Was there anything unexpected? So before you give them feedback, you can test the area, right? And you can prepare yourself in, are you going to give them a positive information? Are they somewhere here? And they're going to be just extremely happy? Or are you going to get them back to reality and they might hate you for it? But, well, we all need to get feedback sometimes, right? So that's maybe a tip for feedback. But what about imposter syndrome? I know you all heard about that. Where is imposter syndrome if we look at this graph? So again, we have the ideal self-awareness line. The most critical point of the Dunning-Kruger effect is up here. So when your competence is lowest and your confidence is highest. And the imposter syndrome is actually just the opposite. So it's on the other side of the ideal self-awareness line when your competence is highest and your confidence is lowest. So in the Dunning-Kruger effect, we are talking about the ability gap at this point. So you have lower competence than you think you do. And in the imposter syndrome, we're talking about the perception gap. So our awareness of how we're doing our skills is really bad. Although we'll give feedback to someone with imposter syndrome with more enthusiasm because they're just going to be happy to hear whatever because every information is positive then. Having an imposter syndrome or self-awareness in this area can be detrimental for self-esteem. But we can talk more about imposter syndrome in a break or outside of this. But with this, we're kind of came to the end of the Dunning-Kruger effect. So what are the solutions? What can you take home from this? One is, it's really important to work on self-awareness. So the exercises that we do, like the SWOT, why are we as consultant managers asking you so many questions about the teams and how you're feeling and how you're interacting with others? It makes sense if you are trying to self-reflect. If you're thinking about your interactions, why are you doing the things that you are, and then you're working on your self-awareness. How can you also work on that? Ask for feedback. So value every perspective. Every feedback is valid, but if you get more pieces of feedback, so a greater volume of feedback, you can get more realistic information about how are you really doing, where are your skills, where is your knowledge. Comparing to others is not something that can improve your self-awareness. Why? Because you don't know where others are in this curve. It really depends on the environment you're in when you're comparing yourself to others. And that's why this shouldn't be the reference point for you when thinking about yourself. And lastly, when estimating results, base it on previous experiences. I know you already do this, but it may be good to tell you anyway. If you're doing time evaluations, base it on your previous experience. How did you do how much time did you need if you needed to do a similar feature as you need to do now? So try to base it on objective things that you have lived through before. Okay, so with this, we've finished with the Dunning-Kruger effect. We're moving to the hello effect. So hello to these new two friends. And my question to you is, looking at these two people, which person here do you think is richer? The right one? You probably know this is like a trick question, but yes, the majority of people would say the left one. Why? The looks. This is what research says, right? He kind of looks better, right? So that's how we come to this hello effect, and on the other side, horn effect. So in the hello effect, we make an overall impression of a person based on one positive trait or characteristic. So maybe he was smiling nicer, he had a nicer shirt, so we're just assuming this person is richer, this person is kinder, this person is more intelligent. On the other side, we have the horn effect, and that's just the opposite. So based on one negative trait, we make our overall negative impression of that person. Maybe that person looked at me funny, and I'm just thinking he must be rude, he must be unintelligent, and just horrible to talk to. These are my implicit thoughts, without me trying to think any differently. So what does research say? How do we observe this in everyday world? There's research in different parts of the world that surrounds us. So starting with, education, we know that that teachers assume that students that behave well are also actually smarter, right? More diligent and engaged. And these are their assumptions without even seeing their results. Also, research shows us that in organizations, when doing performance reviews, raters can make assumptions or based on ridiculous criteria, such as arriving late to work, and they make predictions about this person, if it's arriving late to work, will probably be bad at processing paperwork. This person is probably bad at communicating with a customer, and so on. It continues. then we know from law enforcement that actually defendants who look trustworthy are less likely to be sentenced to death. So it can have a really, really big effect. And if you're thinking about holiday and looking at pictures at Airbnb, it actually makes a difference because people that are more attractive can charge higher rates on Airbnb. But how will this influence software teams? So this halo and horn effects are very known in the interviewing process when you're hiring new people. I know Ani and Eva are professionals in this, but also when you're doing technical interviews, it all matters. So it matters if you look at the picture, if you make assumptions about university they went to, right? They went to Ljubljana, not Maribor, or vice versa. So you make a whole picture based on a few pieces of data, and you already decide, is this person going to do good or bad? Similar is with accepting new team members. You're, in many times, you join a new team here in Treton, or somebody else joins your team. And based on the first impressions that you have with that person, you usually assume how will they do. So if they come and they're very loud in meetings, they have a lot of ideas, you think they're arrogant, they're overconfident, they just don't know how to do it. But if they're quiet, you probably assume they don't have any opinions, they don't know anything about this, they won't contribute to this project at all. So you just make some assumptions based on maybe even a few seconds or a few first impressions that you have. But it's not just about people. So this halo and horn effects are known also when thinking about products. One is impact of design. So here we have, it's not great graphics, but whatever. Here we have 2 websites, and based on just looking at these websites, research shows that users assume that products from this website will be more expensive and higher quality. Why? Because it just looks nicer. So design has a huge impact on the product you're building. Next is spelling errors. I had one spelling error before, so that was probably negative assumption about my presentation that's going to follow. But people actually do that. And that holds for news, websites, and everything else. So spelling errors, really small things, can make a big difference in how people see your product or your website. Ambassadorship. I put a friend Steve there, because every person. So when you go to an event and you present yourself to someone and say, I work at Treton, if you're going to be kind to that person will probably think, Treton is probably really cool. It has cool people. It's a cool company. If you're going to be rude to that person and say, I'm from Treton, they will probably think Treton just has the worst people. I would never work there ever. So ambassadorship, or thinking about what you're doing, that you're actually representing either the product, the team that you work in, or a company, really makes a big difference. And then we have team halo effect. I hear from many of you that you are interacting with other teams at clients. And many times you're not interacting with whole teams, but just with one individual. So one individual from another team joins your meeting, and that individual seems, like they don't know what they're doing, they don't know their product, they don't know how things work, have no idea. And your conclusion is that team sucks. I don't want to work with that team because that team doesn't know what they need to do. They don't know how to explain things to me. I don't want to collaborate with them. So you make an assumption based on one individual in the team about the whole team. And what we also do is, if we have created this halo effect or horn effect with someone, and we see 2 behaviors that are completely the same or identical, we will evaluate the behavior of the person that we evaluated more positively as different and better. So even though the behaviors are the same. So what are the solutions? Again, I'm repeating myself, right? Self-reflect, self-awareness. Try to really prolong decision time when it comes to interviews, when it comes to meeting new people. Really try not to base everything on your first impression. I know it's implicit, it's difficult to do that, but I think first step there is that you are aware that this is happening, and this will influence how you treat that person in your subsequent interactions. As I said, evaluate your first impression. Try to realize what assumptions do you usually make after these experiences that you just had. Important is to have clear criteria. After me, Victor will talk about career progression framework. Sorry, not Victor, Vit. I'm sorry. This is when I'm stressed. So having clear criteria is something we really wanted to do there, because that reduces the chance of us being biased when evaluating each other. And another important thing is, which we have been trying to do all this time and we're really loud about, is trying to encourage diversity at the workplace. Because if we have very different individuals and they're not afraid to be different, then we're less likely to make very quick assumptions about someone's behavior. Because if everyone acts differently, then our patterns that we'll see will not be confirmed and we'll just be less likely to make wrong assumptions. Okay, so we've reached the end. This talk is not about all the biases in the world, as I said, but it's just about some, and to get you a picture of how much can we really, based on a few interactions, how much of a story do we create in our minds and create expectations and even change our behavior based on that. So it's really important to be aware these biases exist, and this is a very important and big step that we can take in reducing these biases. So self-reflection is key. I will end with this. I'm a psychologist, and when I tell people this, they always think, I'm reading their minds. I think it's just the opposite. I think I'm trying to self-reflect more. And I think if we all do that, we're all also going to understand others better. We're going to do better in social situations. And I think this is going beyond for me. Thank you.
Question. This way you may make his progression overall better, but at the same time that sounds like a conflict.
I would ask myself, so what is my ultimate goal? I see my ultimate goal that you grow. How will I make you grow? At some point you have to get feedback. If this feedback means your confidence will go down, which it will, but this also means that you're progressing, right? This also means that you will reevaluate some of the things you know, and you might see that you actually know less than you think you know. So I think my task is to do that, but sometimes it's almost impossible to get people from that peak.
Okay, I see. I'm asking because that's, I agree 100%. That's probably the best. It's just we're not very used to interactions that are supposed to bring our confidence lower rather than higher.
Yes, it's difficult for me as well. It's always easier to say someone positive feedback than criticism. but the aim is to grow. So if at the end of working together you have not grown at all, we both lose.
Okay, thank you.
Here. This one. Not like soft. I wanted to ask, what's the bias that you think us in Triton are like most guilty of? Even like the ones maybe that you didn't mention, if that's the one that's the most common here.
It is the one that I wanted to talk about, but I didn't have enough time because then I just found so many biases that are interesting. But maybe I would say confirmation bias, and that is the bias that we tend to always confirm our hypotheses. So the things that we think are true, we're also going to try to find information that confirms that. So if I think this is a bad person, I will also choose only the situations that confirm that he is bad and remember only those, or a bad person or whatever, a situation or a team.
Oh, no, I don't want to be okay with so okay. Yeah, I know. Regarding confirmation bias, so when you're saying, I assume, would you also say that a lot of that is based on then just lies and things you make up by yourself? Like, or do you look at, like, if I have an assumption about someone and I want to confirm it,
Yes.
that assumption, is it a lie or is it actually because I saw someone do that?
It can be both, but I think conspiracy theories are one very clear example of that. So that's how they're built. People seek for information that confirms that, I don't know, the earth is flat. And if you look at, I like to look at discussions when, I don't know, flat earthers and other people discuss.
But the earth is flat.
They discuss, and it's so interesting to see how firm and how many evidence do these people have. And I think this happens with everything from corona, I don't know, vaccinations, but I won't go into these political topics. But I think, then it's really difficult to have discussions with people that are just 100% sure they're right, and they will show you so many information that confirms that they're right, but they don't see the other side.
It's going to get more psychological here, but I guess I'll stop. But does anyone else have any questions? No, I was just going to ask, like, what makes you, what do you believe as a psychologist is the reason that people seek certain things to confirm, like, what would make me want to strongly believe in an opinion that may or may not be true? Or like you said, flat earthers, for example.
I think it increases your confidence, especially if you think you know something that others don't. That's like a feeling of power, and that's also with conspiracy theories, right? So you think others actually are just like sheep who are following everyone's opinion, but you actually know the truth. And you feel smart and strong and powerful and better than everyone else. So it kind of increases your confidence, and you're probably in the Dunning-Kruger effect on the peak. I know it all, but you don't.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Let's say, hypothetically, when you self-reflect and observe more and be more susceptible to different effects, how do you fight against when your first impressions or your initial biases are confirmed? Well, with those confirmed biases, your estimation kind of grows. And how do you fight against that? Because you still need to keep yourself, I don't know, not so confident.
Yes,
How would you address that?
I think it's a great question. I didn't talk about that, but the thing why we have these biases, let's say about Italians, also because many times these biases are true. They turn out to be true. And that just pumps it up. right?
Yeah.
And there is no situation where we will come to a point that there will be no biases. We will always make them. And this is not the goal to say, I'm bias free. I'm never gonna think badly about, I don't know. But I think the goal is just to know that this exists. I think this is one of the most important things. Just knowing that it exists, and you might be thinking this just because of that. When I see this is not a good example, but for example, there is this idea that the drivers who drive a BMW don't ever put blinkers. So then I can't say is this true or not, right? We could read the research about it, but I think when I see a BMW now, I'm thinking, oh, I'm already having this thought now that he will not put up a blinker. So I'm just aware this is happening, but I'm still feeling it anyway,
And then confirmation bias kicks in and confirms that.
So very bad process. Like it's probably true, but at the end you don't have to do it. I thought that's why playing most people don't do patience.
Sorry. It was a dumb example, but this is all I could come up with. Did it answer your question? Or?
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. That's it. One more round of applause.
Thank you.